The boy's voice cut through the noise of the Rideau Street market before anyone saw him move. "Don't touch it, sir, there's glass." He was maybe 9, maybe 10. Hard to tell with kids who'd been hungry long enough. He stood beside the overturned produce cart, barefoot on the wet pavement, pointing at the scatter of broken pickle jars that had spilled across the sidewalk toward a man in a gray coat who was walking with a white cane and had absolutely no idea what was 2 steps ahead of him. The man stopped. His name was Reginald Holt, 63 years old, senior partner at Holt & Carver, one of the oldest estate law firms in Ottawa. He had argued before the Supreme Court 4 times. He had a house in the Glebe with original hardwood floors and a kitchen his late wife had picked out herself, and he had been blind in both eyes for 14 months, following a sudden and catastrophic detachment of both retinas that his ophthalmologist had called, with clinical gentleness, extraordinarily rare. He had not yet learned how to be blind gracefully. He stopped walking because the voice surprised him. It was small and direct and did not have the careful over-enunciation people used when they spoke to him now. The way they slowed everything down as if his eyes had taken his hearing with them. "How much glass?" he asked. "Lot," the boy said. "Maybe 2 meters wide. Goes right across. Can I go around? If you go left, there's a pole at 2 meters, then it's clear." Reginald went left. He counted his steps with the cane. The pole was exactly where the boy said it would be. When he cleared the glass, he turned back toward where the voice had come from. "Thank you." No answer. He stood there for a moment on Rideau Street, with the October market noise moving around him. The French from the cheese vendor's stall, the transit bus braking at the corner, someone's dog barking at something it would never catch, and realized the boy was already gone. He thought about him on the walk home. Not obsessively, not in the way that something lodges and won't leave. Just a small, clean thought, the kind you turn over once and set down. That a child with bare feet in October had taken the time to tell him about glass on the pavement, and then had vanished before he could say anything more than thank you. The cane found the crack in the front step he'd been meaning to have fixed since August. He went inside. The house was quiet. It had been quiet since Helen died 2 years ago, a different kind of quiet than the blindness had brought. Older, deeper, the kind of quiet that had his wife's shape in it. Reginald had kept her reading chair in the front room. He could find it in the dark now without the cane. He sat in it sometimes and did not read. His daughter Sylviane called at 6. "How was the market?" "There was a boy," he said, and then felt slightly foolish for beginning with that. "A child. He warned me about glass on the sidewalk." "Good," she said, in the tone she used when she was also looking at something on her phone. "Did you get the sourdough?" He had forgotten the sourdough. The boy was there again on Thursday. Reginald heard him before he reached the market. Not his voice this time, but a sound he couldn't immediately place, rhythmic and low, coming from the alcove beside the Heritage Building on the north side of the street. When he stopped and tilted his head, he understood it. Someone was pulling staples from a wooden pallet with a piece of metal, one at a time, steadily, filling some kind of container with them. "You're collecting staples," he said, to no one in particular, to see what would happen. "They're steel," the voice said. Same voice, same direct, unsurprised quality. "The recycling place on Murray gives you 50 cents for a full tin." Reginald considered this. "How long does a tin take? Depends on how many pallets I find. Maybe 3 days. That's a lot of work for 50 cents. It's 50 cents more than nothing." He couldn't argue with that. He stood for a moment with his cane resting on the pavement. "What's your name?" A pause, not a suspicious pause, more like the question was being assessed for its usefulness. "Kit," the boy said. "Short for something?" "Just Kit." "All right." Reginald reached into his coat pocket. He was carrying his wallet because Sylviane had made him promise to carry it, even though buying things at the market without being able to read the bills was still something he managed badly. He found a coin by feel, the ridged edge of a loonie, and held it out in the direction of the voice. "I don't need charity," Kit said. "It's not charity. You helped me on Tuesday. Glass on the sidewalk." Another pause, longer. "You remember that?" "I remember everything," Reginald said. "I'm blind, not forgetful." Something shifted in the air. He couldn't see it, but he'd learned over 14 months that you could hear a smile sometimes, in the small change of breath. Kit took the loonie. By November, it had become a kind of arrangement. Not one they'd discussed, not one with any formal shape. But Thursdays and Saturdays, Reginald walked to the Rideau Street market, and most Thursdays and Saturdays Kit appeared somewhere along the route and fell into step beside him, and they moved through the market together in a way that didn't require explanation. Kit had a system. He called it nothing. It was simply how he moved, but Reginald mapped it quickly. The boy named things as they approached: a step, a wet patch, a street musician with a cello case open on the ground, a cluster of kids on bikes that might or might not yield. He did not over-describe. He did not speak slowly. He treated Reginald's blindness as a logistics problem with workable solutions, which was more than most people managed. In return, Reginald bought Kit lunch. A bowl of soup from the stall by the parquet, usually, or a ham and cheese baguette from the French baker who called everyone mon ami and never seemed to remember that he'd seen them before. Kit ate quickly and without apparent self-consciousness, the way people ate when they weren't certain of the next meal. Reginald noticed. He didn't say anything. He'd spent 40 years as a lawyer, and he knew the shape of a story that wasn't ready to be told yet. The first time he asked Kit to come inside, it was because it was raining. Not Ottawa drizzle. A serious, cold, lateral November rain that had ambushed them both between the market and the corner of Charlotte Street. And Reginald had his umbrella, but it was a single umbrella, and Kit was, as far as he could determine, wearing a canvas jacket that would do nothing against this kind of weather. "My house is 3 blocks," he said. "You can dry off before you go." "I'm fine, you're wet. So are you." "I live 3 blocks away," Reginald said. "You don't." Kit didn't answer, but he didn't leave either, and when Reginald started walking, the footsteps came along beside him. The house surprised the boy. Reginald couldn't see his face, but he heard it, the slight change in how Kit's feet moved when they came through the front door, the way he slowed without realizing it. "It's old," Reginald said. "Edwardian, 1908. The ceilings are 11 feet. Why do you know that if you can't see them?" "I've known this house for 31 years. I don't need to see it." He found the kitchen by memory, put the kettle on by memory, and set 2 mugs on the counter. He heard Kit move carefully through the front room. The boy was touching things lightly, the way a person touched things when they were trying to understand a space without disturbing it. "There's a chair by the window," Reginald said. "The blue one. You can sit. How do you know it's by the window?" "Because my wife put it there and I never moved it." Silence. Then Kit said quietly, "Oh, that was all, but it was the right thing." Reginald had found over the past 2 years that most people responded to the mention of Helen by pivoting rapidly to something else, to talking about him, to trying to fix the air. Kit just said, "Oh," and let it stand there, which meant he understood that some things were not problems to be solved. Reginald made tea. He made it without asking what Kit wanted, because he'd learned that asking Kit questions that offered an easy out meant Kit would take the easy out. He set the mug on the low table where he knew it would be reachable and sat in the chair across from the window. "Where do you sleep?" he asked. A long pause. "Different places. The shelters on Waller, sometimes." "And when not the shelters?" Kit didn't answer. Reginald waited. He was good at waiting. 37 years of estate law had taught him that the most important information was usually in what came after the silence, not before it. "There's a parking structure on Dalhousie," Kit said finally. "Third level's usually dry." Reginald set his mug down. He did not say anything immediately. He sat with that information for a moment. A child sleeping on the 3rd level of a parking structure on Dalhousie Street, and he thought about what Helen would have done. He knew exactly what Helen would have done. Helen had brought home a stray cat, 2 international students whose housing had fallen through, and an elderly neighbor who needed someone to check on her medication, all within the same calendar year. She had not asked Reginald's permission for any of it. She had simply brought them in and told him they were staying, and looked at him in a way that made the discussion very short. "There's bed on the 2nd floor," Reginald said. "It has a proper bed and a radiator that works and a window that faces the garden." "It was my daughter's room. She lives in Canada now and comes home for holidays." Kit said nothing. "I'm not offering charity," Reginald said, before the boy could use that word. "I am offering a room in exchange for what you already do. You navigate with me. You tell me where the glass is. You keep pace with me. In return, you have a bed and meals and a roof, and my housekeeper, Patrice, comes Tuesdays and Fridays, and she makes enough food for 6 people regardless of how many are in the house, so there is always more than enough." The rain came down hard on the window. "Why?" Kit said. It was not an ungrateful question. It was a precise one. Reginald respected it. "Because a parking structure in November is no place for a child," he said. "And because you're the only person who's talked to me normally in 14 months. And because my wife would have done it immediately, and I've been slower than she was about most things, but I try to get there eventually." Another long silence. Then, "I don't have much stuff." "Good," Reginald said. "The room is small." Kit's stuff turned out to be a backpack. Inside it, 2 changes of clothes, a library card from the Ottawa Public Library on Metcalfe Street, a photograph in a Ziploc bag, a pocket knife with a broken blade, a small notebook filled with handwriting too small to read in poor light, and a bus transfer from September that had expired 3 months ago. Reginald did not see any of this. Patrice, who arrived on Tuesday and found a child sleeping in the second bedroom and responded with the efficiency of someone who had long ago decided that Reginald Holt's house operated on its own logic, told him about the backpack because he asked, "The photograph?" Reginald said. "A woman," Patrice said, "young. And the boy, when he was smaller, maybe 5 or 6. Reginald nodded and did not ask more. The first problem came in the second week. It came in the form of Jeffrey, Reginald's junior partner at Holt and Carver, who arrived on a Wednesday to go through the Vandermeer estate files and found Kit eating cereal at the kitchen table and reading a library book about marine biology. Jeffrey was 41, had a corner office overlooking the canal, and had been maneuvering for senior partnerships since Helen's funeral, when he had taken Reginald's arm at the reception with the particular firmness of someone who had already begun calculating. "Reggie," he said from the kitchen doorway. "Who is this?" "This is Kit," Reginald said. He was making coffee. He had gotten very good at making coffee. "He's staying with me." "Staying with you." Jeffrey repeated the words without adding a question mark, which was his technique for expressing skepticism while maintaining plausible neutrality. "For how long?" "We haven't discussed a timeline," Reginald said. He heard Kit go still over the cereal bowl. "Can I speak to you for a moment?" Jeffrey said. "In the study?" In the study, Jeffrey spoke for approximately 4 minutes. He used phrases like liability exposure and safeguarding concerns and what the partners will think and given your current situation. That last phrase, Reginald knew, was code for the blindness. It was always code for the blindness. The entire professional world had reorganized itself around the polite suggestion that he was no longer fully capable of his own decisions. "His name is Kit," Reginald said when Jeffrey finished. "He is 9 years old. He sleeps in Sylviane's old room and eats Patrice's cooking and navigates with me at the market. He has caused no liability, presented no safeguarding concern, and what the partners think is frankly not something I have ever organized my personal life around. Reggie, the Vandermeer files are on the desk. Let's get started." Jeffrey stayed for the files. He did not say anything more about Kit, but Reginald heard him pause in the kitchen doorway on his way out, and he knew without needing to see it that Jeffrey was looking at the boy with the kind of look that filed information away for later use. He mentioned it to Kit that evening, not the whole conversation. Just, "You may hear things. People at my office or my daughter. They'll ask questions about me being here." "Yes." Kit was quiet. Then, "What do you tell them?" "The truth," Reginald said, "that you're staying here, that it suits us both, and if they don't like it, then they don't like it," he said. "I've spent 37 years accommodating other people's opinions. I find I'm less interested in that than I used to be." He could tell, from the silence, that this was not the answer Kit had expected. Most adults, Reginald suspected, had spent a fair amount of time explaining to this child why things couldn't be what they were. In December, something changed. Reginald noticed it first because of sound. He'd become a geographer of sound, the particular way the house settled at 9 at night versus 2 in the morning, the different acoustic weight of an empty room versus an occupied one. Kit had been with him for 3 weeks, and the house had a different weight. Not loud, just inhabited. But in the second week of December, there was something else. A phone call Kit took in the back garden, in the cold, that lasted 20 minutes. The low, tight register Kit's voice dropped into when he thought he wasn't being heard. The way the marine biology book sat closed on the table for 4 days, bookmark in the same place. On a Thursday evening, Reginald asked, "Is something wrong?" "No, Kit." A pause. "There's a man," Kit said. "He used to. I knew him. From before. He knows I'm here now. How does he know?" "Jeffrey," Kit said. "I think. He was asking Patrice questions the last time he came." Reginald set his fork down. He thought about Jeffrey's pause in the kitchen doorway, about the careful way Jeffrey had been calling more often than the files required, asking small questions about the house, about Kit, about Reginald's schedule. "What does this man want?" he said. Kit was quiet for a long time. "He knows you're rich," he said, "and he knows you can't see, and he thinks I can tell him things about the house. When you're home, where things are." Reginald sat with this for a moment. "And can you," he said, "tell him things?" "I haven't," Kit said. "I won't." The boy's voice had gone very flat, not defensive, certain. The difference between someone trying to convince you and someone simply stating a fact. "All right," Reginald said. "You believe me?" "Yes." "Why?" Reginald picked up his fork again. "Because you've had 3 weeks to take what you wanted and you've taken nothing except cereal and library books. Because you told me about the glass on the sidewalk before you knew anything about me. Because you don't lie. I can hear when people lie, it changes the cadence of their breathing slightly, and you've never done it." Silence. "What do we do?" Kit said. "We call the police," Reginald said. "And then I call my solicitor. And then I call Jeffrey and have a conversation that I've been putting off for 2 years. He paused. "But first, finish your dinner." What unfolded over the next 10 days was not dramatic, in the way Reginald had expected drama to feel. It was paperwork and phone calls, and one very uncomfortable meeting at the firm where Jeffrey, confronted with specific questions, became specific in ways he had not intended to be. He had not, it turned out, done anything legally actionable. He had asked Patrice questions. He had relayed what he learned to a man he owed money to. A man with connections to a family whose estate Reginald had managed 17 years ago, and who had never forgiven the terms of that management. It was small and sordid, and had the particular odor of desperation that Reginald had learned to recognize in clients who came to him too late. Jeffrey resigned from the partnership before Reginald had to ask. The man Kit had known from before, a figure from a period of Kit's life that the boy described in brief, careful sentences, a period involving a man who had used children as an informal network of information and small errands, and who was now, as a result of Reginald's solicitor's call to the right people, the subject of a social services inquiry, did not call the house again. In January, Sylviane came. She came because she had to, for the holidays that had stretched and rearranged themselves around what was happening. And she stood in the kitchen in her good coat, and looked at Kit eating toast, and looked at her father standing at the counter and said, in French, thinking perhaps the boy wouldn't understand, "Papa, what is this?" Kit, who had spent 4 years in a school system that had taught him enough French to follow that particular sentence, looked up from his toast, and then very deliberately looked back down at it. Reginald answered in English. "This is Kit," he said. "He navigates with me. He's been here since November. He's a child." "Yes, where are his parents?" "His mother died," Reginald said. "His father is not in the picture. There are no other close relatives who've been identified." Sylviane sat down. She looked at Kit for a long moment. Kit looked at his toast with the focused attention of someone who had learned that adults needed time to have their conversations without it becoming about the child in the room. "What does social services say?" she asked. "They are aware of the situation," Reginald said. "We are in the early stages of a formal fostering arrangement. My solicitor is handling it." Sylviane was quiet. "You should have called me," she said. "Yes," he said. "I should have. I'm sorry." She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Kit. "Do you like Montreal smoked meat?" she said. Kit looked up. "I've never had it," he said. "Well," Sylviane said, and took off her coat and hung it on the hook by the door the way she had since she was 6 years old. "We'll fix that." In February, the fostering papers were signed. Patrice made a cake. She made it without asking anyone, the same way she did everything in this house, as a logical response to a situation that clearly required it. It was a lemon cake with vanilla icing, and she put it on the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, and when Reginald found it with his hand and understood what it was, he stood there for a moment with his palm flat on the table beside it. "Patrice," he said. "I know," she said. He wasn't sure exactly what she knew. He was fairly sure it covered most of it. Kit came downstairs at 8:15 the way he did every morning now, backpack over one shoulder out of habit, though he'd stopped carrying it packed the way he had in the beginning. Reginald had noticed some weeks ago that the backpack sat on the chair in the corner of the room now instead of propped against the wall by the door. He had not said anything. Some things you didn't say. "There's cake," Kit said. "Patrice made it," Reginald said. "Why?" "Because today the papers are finalized." A pause. "Oh," Kit said. Reginald heard him sit down. Heard the chair scrape slightly on the tile the way it always did when Kit pulled it out at a slight angle, which he did every morning without knowing he did it. He'd learned the sound of this child the way he'd learned the house, incrementally, without meaning to, until it was simply the furniture of a known world. "Are you having some?" Kit asked. "Yes," Reginald said. He found the plates in the cabinet where they always were. He cut 2 pieces by feel, which he had gotten surprisingly good at. He set one in front of Kit and one at his own place, and sat down. "Reggie?" Kit said. It was the first time he'd used the name. He'd been calling him Sir for 3 months, or occasionally Mr. Holt, with a slight formality that Reginald had never pushed against because he understood the distance it offered, the way it kept things in the register of workable arrangement rather than something more complicated. He'd expected it to change slowly, if at all. He hadn't expected Reggie. "Yes," Reginald said. "Thank you," Kit said. "Not the way you said it to a stranger who'd done you a favor. Not the way you said it in the market on a Tuesday in October when someone warned you about glass on the sidewalk. The way you said it when you were 9 and the thing you were thanking someone for was too large for the words available, and you used the words you had anyway, because they were what you had." Reginald sat with the plate of lemon cake in front of him and the February light coming through the kitchen window in whatever way February light in Ottawa comes through windows. He could feel it on his hands, and he did not trust himself to say anything for a moment. Then he said, "You're welcome," and that was true too. The backpack was still on the chair in the corner. Kit had stopped carrying it packed, but he hadn't put it away, and Reginald didn't ask him to. Some things you kept close, not because you needed them, but because you'd learned, hard and early, that the world could change without warning. And there was wisdom in being someone who was never entirely unprepared. Reginald understood that. He'd been a lawyer for 37 years. He kept things too. Files, precedents, the careful record of what had happened before. Not out of fear exactly. Out of respect for the truth that the future was always arriving, and that the best you could do was face it knowing what you knew. The boy with the backpack and the man with the white cane had both separately learned that lesson the hard way. It had brought them to the same kitchen table. Outside, Ottawa in February was doing what Ottawa in February always did, bare and bright and completely indifferent to what anyone inside any house on any street might be feeling. The sky over the glebe would be that particular shade of cold blue that meant the temperature was still falling, and the cracks in the front step were probably worse now for the freeze-thaw, and the garden Helen had planted was asleep under the snow, waiting. It would come back in April. It always did. Reginald picked up his fork, so did Kit.